We're immediately going to debut him. He's going to be on Raw the very next night. This is going to be Raw from the Manhattan Center. You may recall we had an opportunity to see Ken sitting front row with his wife, Tina, and they're going to refer to him by saying he is who ABC television called the most dangerous man in the world. And of course, they're going to mention him being a controversial superstar from the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They're even going to refer to him as a UFC star and champion. And Jerry Lawler's going to come over to interview him, and they're going to have a little fun with this, where Lawler's basically bragging that I taught you everything you know and taught you all those submission holds. And Shamrock's going to act like he has no idea who Jerry Lawler is. And another time in the show, Todd Pettengill is going to come out to ask him about the two WrestleMania main event matches. And at that point, Farouk comes out and gets in his face and starts making disparaging remarks about the UFC. And Shamrock does a wrestling promo. I wouldn't say it came off as great, but it wasn't terrible. But this is the first effort. But it does. Here's the context I didn't know until today, or when we were doing research for this show, that he signed the night before and then the next day's on TV. So if you had, I mean, I know you're trying to get in front of it and you want to get this news out there and make a splash, but was there a different way to introduce Ken Shamrock with the benefit of hindsight? And I know it's easy to armchair quarterback after the fact.
Now it is, sure.
Yeah.
But we had to hit while the iron was hot.
Right.
The media got a hold of it. It was a big deal. You know, we needed some positive publicity. Kenny provided that. Those interviews are just simplistic interviews. Of course, with Lawler with his Monday Night Raw shtick. Todd Pettengill was doing interviews at that time. So I thought we were on a good target. I thought we're in a good spot, and we're looking forward to getting him started.
It's interesting because it's written about in the Observer, like, hey, this is going to be one or the other. Shamrock's going to be a huge star or he's going to be a flop. There's almost no in between here. And it's even suggested that, well, here's exactly what it says. McMahon is taking a huge risk that will either pay off in the end as a great investment and a franchise player or a better working, more charismatic version of Mark Henry. Now, we know at this point, Mark Henry hadn't quite put it together. He's going to have a Hall of Fame career eventually, but it was a slow start. But I do think Mark is a fair comparison because here's a guy who has some name recognition and some, some marketability based on what he's done outside of the company when he comes in. But it is a learning curve. It's not like you can go from being an all-star weightlifter to all of a sudden you're just a fantastic pro wrestler. Did you guys have confidence in Vince's or in Ken rather's previous wrestling experience, or did you think we're going to have to treat this like he's starting brand new, fresh day one?
Not quite brand new. He had some skills. Kenny did. Kenny has some skills. He seems to be motivated to improve his pro wrestling game. He was a natural, Conrad. He just was a natural, and was very viable in our world. We thought he was going to do very well, and all in all, he did do very well.
What's interesting is this is a major shock, this signing and appearance on WWF television for New Japan, because we know that Ken Shamrock had offers from the UFC and from New Japan and from the WWF, and allegedly had a potential meeting scheduled with WCW. But when that offer comes in on the 23rd, which is a Sunday from Vince, and he appears on TV on the 24th, a few days prior to that, on February 19th, New Japan held a press conference announcing, hey, we're running a Tokyo Dome show on April 12th, and it's Hashimoto versus Shamrock in the main event. That's announced on the 19th, Jim, and 5 days later, he's on WWF TV. Do you think New Japan felt like you guys had double cross them? Did this hurt your relationship with New Japan?
It's all part of the negotiation, quite frankly. I mean, that's all it was. They jumped the gun. If I was having to say, they jumped the gun a little bit. They had their, what would I say? They had their ducks They didn't have their ducks in order. They thought they had a deal. They thought they had a deal, and Kenny was just playing both sides against the middle.
It's pretty interesting to think that, you know, they're watching Monday night. That would have been Tuesday afternoon in Japan, and this sends shockwaves through the country because they think, hey, wait a minute, we were going to get this as the main event. How can he be there? And even Meltzer's saying it's still possible. It just means they've got to negotiate with Vince McMahon. Do you think Vince was ever interested in having a formal relationship with New Japan? I
No,
never really got that vibe at all.
no, I agree with you. He didn't. You know, Kenny, like I said, Kenny had he was conflicted. You know, he wanted that one big payday, which I don't blame him for. But we had plans for him, and we're getting into WrestleMania season, so I think the Japanese folks got a little bit ahead of themselves in this deal. So, but it was some interesting negotiation times, to say the least. A lot of dialogue, and it got to be boorish.
I'm wondering, was this a way, do you think, with the benefit of hindsight, for Vince to really build a superstar in Japan? The idea being, if he does work a deal out with New Japan and Ken Shamrock goes over and headlines some major shows, like some Tokyo Dome shows, said differently, that's almost like the Japanese equivalent of a WrestleMania. And if Ken Shamrock's in the prime spot and Vince is now able to say, well, he can't lose, you can use him, but he can't lose. And now that technically means that a contracted WWF star might actually be their world champion. Then, if and when the WWF decided to run in Japan, they'd have a major box office attraction and an established star now in Ken Shamrock. Was that part of the thinking, or am I overthinking it?
No, I think that's part of the thinking in a casual way, at least. He was just he was money. He was money on both sides of the world, and he had a great following in Japan. He was a star there. He was a made star there, and we wanted to get ahead of the curve and try to monetize our investment. And so that's what we were trying to do. But Kenny was hard to do with. He didn't want to give up that money, and he didn't want to give up that fact that he had done a hell of a job in building his reputation there. The Japanese have done a great job in making Kenny a star, and so that's kind of where I saw the whole thing. I believed, as the head of talent relations, that he was a guy that we could develop and build into a star. You know, I thought I could envision great matches with Ken. You know, with a lot of different guys, including Bret Hart. I thought they had great chemistry. They respected each other, and I thought that could be something fresh and new and different. And so that's kind of what we were shooting for. And he signed with us. I signed him up like you said earlier, Conrad, 3-year deal, and it worked out well. It worked in that respect. We got what we wanted. We got a 3-year commitment from what we thought was going to be a very talented, potentially talented superstar.